So we have all these major greenhouse gases, and we've just looked at the correlation between temperature and sea level. And so what's happening with human activity in these greenhouse gases? Well, human activity has emitted huge quantities of this stuff into the atmosphere. Since the Industrial Revolution, which is 1860 up to present time, that date's a little off, of course, but nonetheless, the average concentration of CO2, methane, and nitrous oxide have all been grown much higher, and so those graphs are shown right down here. You see CO2 is high and continues to grow significantly. Methane and nitrous oxide have both grown. They're leveling off a little bit more, but nonetheless there's been significant changes in the quantity of those in the atmosphere. And this is mostly due to burning of fossil fuels, agriculture, and deforestation, which all have an effect on these quantities. So what countries kick out the most CO2, which is the main culprit here? You'll see the United States produces about 25% of all the CO2 on the planet, China 5%, and then the European Union, made of 27 countries, produces quite a bit too. So you can see that if you're yellow on this map, you're producing a lot of CO2. And then if you're light green, you're producing less, and if you're dark green, you're not producing very much at all. So you see that the European Union and Asia and North America are all causing most of the problems, with Australia helping out a little. And so, is the atmosphere warming up because of human activity? So it's pretty obvious, and the data shows it from those graphs, that the Earth is warming up. That's not a question. That's not a debate. The debate that you guys hear about in the news all the time is, does human activity exacerbate this? Are we causing this heat up to happen, or are we accelerating this with our activities? And so back in 1988, the UN put together this panel called the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And they researched and studied it, basically. This panel includes 2,500 climate scientists from 130 different countries. And they studied the process from 1988 up to the point where they released the report in 2007. And this report basically said, yes, humans are creating this problem. So 90 to 99% likelihood that the lower atmosphere is warmer because humans are involved in the process. And so this came out, of course, there's political backlash. Some people didn't like to hear that, and that has created kind of a stir on things. This is what the IPCC basically used for evidence, major pieces of evidence to support their conclusions. The 20th century is the hottest part of the past 1,000 years. So you see all those spikes at the end of those first graphs I showed you. From 1906 to 2005, the temperature has increased by 0.74. Now, remember, that number doesn't sound like a lot, but remember, since the last ice age, the temperature's only risen 5 degrees. So 5 degrees takes you from an ice age to what we're currently working with. This change, then, is a much more significant number than you might think, based on the fact that it's only 1 degree. You go, oh, it's not a big deal, but that is a significant change, relatively speaking. From 1970 to 2005, the greenhouse emissions have went up by 70+%. In the past 50 years, we've seen Arctic temperatures rise almost double and speed up twice as fast as the rest of the Earth. So here are some of the major pieces of evidence. Other pieces of evidence that supported their conclusion that they decided to draw. Glaciers and floating ice sheets were melting and shrinking at increasing rates. They were seeing prolonged droughts that were increasing. The sea level rose between 10 and 20 centimeters, mostly due to the runoff of melting ice on land and the expansion of seawater, which is an interesting one. It gets hotter, it expands, and so that, nonetheless, 10 to 20 centimeters. So that's a significant change in water level around the globe. There have been warmer temperatures reported in Alaska and Russia and the Arctic, which has resulted in permafrost melting, and that permafrost then releases more methane into the atmosphere, which is another positive feedback loop that increases the amount of temperature on the planet because of more greenhouse gases. The range and distribution of plants and animals is shifting on the globe, and in the mid-latitudes, spring is coming earlier and fall is coming later. And so these are all pieces of evidence that helped the IPCC form the conclusion they've formed. Okay? And so whether you believe in that conclusion or not, that's up for public debate. But the vast majority of scientists in the field, and we're talking, depends what study you read, but 97 to 99% is where you'll mostly find it. That is the percentage of climate scientists who believe that humans are causing this increase in temperature in recent time. So the book goes ahead and supports it that direction. That is the accepted scientific point of view based on peer-reviewed evidence and data collections. And so while it's definitely not a fact, it is used as general assumption in conversation. And so that's why, and this is some of the evidence that they used to base it on that. All right? So we'll move on here in a little bit.